Mr. IG Aonuma has promised Zelda Wii U to be the ultimate installment in the series, pushing the hardware it is based on to its limit and not allow his team to be constrained by established conventions.
Absolutely, and if there is one convention keeping the series from evolving, then I would say it is the convoluted and close to messed up at this point official Zelda timeline, restricting everything from story possibilities to the size and extent of specific towns, villages, and settlements in the games.
Interesting what you point out there, but I have a more controversial approach, since several details in both the E3 reveal and the Game Awards presentation pointed Zelda Wii U abandoning the timeline and rebooting the entire franchise. Anyways, this is Zelda Reborn. Hello everyone, and welcome to Zelda Unknown special fully devoted to clarify what kind of reform Zelda Wii U might be about to carry out on the franchise, and perhaps even gaming in general. Since though the dream of an ultimate Zelda seems to become a reality, many questions remain unanswered. For instance, what is the damn title of the game? What placement will the game have in the still fresh, but ever so controversial Zelda timeline? And finally, does Zelda Wii U mark a revolution, or rather an evolution for the series? To help me answer these and some other crucial questions, I've invited Andy of M.Productions and Ed of Zeltik for an extensive collaboration. The first part of it about how the timeline was a bad move of Nintendo to begin with. Check out M.Productions' channel.
I believe the many inconsistencies throughout the Zelda series pointed out in the previous part are elements series producer Mr. IG Aonuma and his development team are aware of. More importantly, it seems they have embraced the idea that in order to create the ultimate installment in the series, they cannot afford restricting themselves to established conventions in the Zelda timeline. This is why the first argument to abandon the timeline and reboot the series derives from the actual gameplay shown at the E3 reveal in June and the Game Awards in December last year.
In the E3 reveal, we could immediately notice that Epona has a different appearance than in all previous installments, and that the time shift enemy present in Skyward Sword might make a return in the form of the mechanic monster. But apart from these two examples, the only indications we got were Link's shield resembling the Sheikah symbol and Hyrule Field with Hyrule Castle barely visible in the distance and Death Mountain located to the east of it. The E3 reveal gave the impression of Zelda Wii U being a Skyward Sword sequel due to the time shift monster and the Sheikah shield. At the same time, many noticed the similarity between the scenes of the trailer and the scene from the Japanese movie and masterpiece Princess Mononoke.
The Japanese references are definitely strong with this one, as shortly after the reveal, series producer Mr. IG Aonuma stated, "In terms of the scale of the new Zelda world on Wii U, I always think of Kyoto as my base. This, and the fact that the farmers seen in the lower right corner of the opening screen look suspiciously similar to the farmers from Princess Mononoke, makes me wonder whether Aonuma and EAD3 will in a larger extent let the game be influenced by Japanese cultural references, as the closest we have gotten to this point to Japanese cultural references, in this clearly inspired by medieval Central Europe, were the Buddha influences in Skyward Sword and the Triforce."
It makes sense since the Protectorate of Kyoto is home to both Nintendo of Japan and EAD3, but more importantly, the place of series creator Mr. Shigeru Miyamoto and series producer Mr. IG Aonuma's birth, childhood, and finally career as game developers. Interestingly, Mr. IG Aonuma has even made a remark about the Japanese influence. "I thought about various ways to make the graphical style fit the vast new Zelda world, imitating the real-world attachment and important feeling of realism, and making it look different to the past. This was done by drawing inspiration from Japanese animations, now compared to what we showed you at E3, and has become something even more amazing." But let's get over to the December 2014 Game Awards presentation and discuss how this 4-minute demo threw all previous beliefs of Zelda Wii U's timeline placement right out of the window. In the opening shot, we are introduced to a scene that clearly was inspired by one of the concept arts from the original Legend of Zelda, where Link is walking up to the edge of a cliff with mountains in the distance. This opening of the demo made us all speculate whether or not Zelda U will be a remake of the original Legend of Zelda, a return to the roots of the series 30 years after its initial release.
Then out of nowhere we are back in the unified timeline with Link jumping off the cliff and releasing the sailcloth. However, something is not as it should be since it behaves more like the Deku Leaf, and the watchout towers present in the terrain do also look suspiciously similar to those found in Wind Waker. What is going on? To stir more confusion into the mix, Epona is confirmed by Miyamoto to have a different appearance. Now we get back to the next shock of the demo. Link is indeed right-handed. Does this point at Zelda U being a Skyward Sword sequel?
But then again, the enemy NPCs next to the supposed dungeon area seems to be a crossover between the Moblins and the Bokoblins from Wind Waker. And what in the name of the Triforce does this untouched Great Bridge of Hyrule have to do in Zelda Wii U? Filling the gap in the child timeline?
Calm down, Andy. We have still not touched the mess that is the overworld map.
Oh no.
Oh yes, the gamepad demonstration. A map so different from any prior Zelda title that it begs the question whether it actually is a fusion of provinces from 3 of the most commercially successful installments in the series. Twilight Princess in the west, Ocarina of Time in the center and north, and the original Legend of Zelda in the east and some of the central sections. In other words, this map is basically a fusion of 3 different timeline branches: Child, Unified and Downfall. I wonder what other evidence we need to prove that Mr. Aonuma and his team are indeed abandoning the timeline and preparing for a reboot of the series with Zelda Wii U.
Well, you have the sea in the east, which obviously must be inspired by Wind Waker and the original Legend of Zelda. Take this into consideration, Nintendo had simultaneously, alongside Zelda U, developed the remakes of the Wind Waker for the Wii U and Majora's Mask for the 3DS. Could Aonuma's vision of an ultimate Zelda installment require them to unchain themselves from the restriction of the timeline in order to fuse and implement the very best the series has to offer throughout its 30 years of existence?
At the same time, a reboot could be a type of rescue for a series, which since Twilight Princess has been limiting the developers to fit their work of art to a fictional timeline. When Mr. Eiji Aonuma points at Zelda U's most important ambition being to break established conventions, he most likely refers to giving the development team the creative freedom they need in order to create a groundbreaking installment, not bound by any given rules and setting gameplay over story.
Okay guys, we've been going back and forth here and the viewers deserve to know why abandoning the timeline is a good idea apart from the geography, and what kind of possibilities a reborn, non-linear Zelda could bring to the table. To serve as a good example, let me throw in the first fire torch: the races. Several of the races present in the Zelda universe are unfortunately strictly bound to specific timeline branches, and then you don't even have to look further than the Sheikah and Gerudo civilizations. Both are presumed to have become extinct as a result of the lengthy wars, and do not appear in greater extent in later installments within the Child, Adult and Downfall timelines. And no, Four Swords Adventures does not count. If Zelda Wii U abandons the timeline, then this would create the potential to include all desired races in the game, ranging from Hylian, Gorons, Sea Zora, River Zora, Sheikah, Gerudo, Kokiri, Deku, Yeti, and even a return of the Minish or the Picori, setting the stage for a more diversified Zelda as a result.
Next, we have enemies and villains, though to this point we have only been witness to a limited number of enemy NPCs in Zelda Wii U. The ones introduced so far, the Bokoblin lookalike and the Timeshift mini-boss, share several similarities to monsters from previous installments, and from completely different timeline branches. This just strengthens the belief of the monsters following the idea of a fusion of the greatest elements in the series within the rebooted Zelda title. One other interesting note is that Ganondorf/Ganon has been confirmed to not appear as the main villain of the game, at least not in a direct form. The question then is, who will be the main villain of the game? And more importantly, might we finally see evil Hylians in a 3D installment that we might be forced to fight? After all, you fought humans in the form of the Gerudo in Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. Anyways, a not bound by the timeline main villain can mark a radical difference from all the established ones, as he would not be bound by the curse cast by Demise at the end of Skyward Sword. This could mark for some interesting twists and plot possibilities in Zelda U.
Not only that, Andy, abandoning the timeline or rebooting it could also mark for the introduction of several different game endings, based on the decisions you make throughout the main quests and the many undiversified side quests, thus adding more replay value to the game. The trick here though will be to camouflage the decisions in a way where the consequence of them will first be visible several hours after you have taken them in the main story, or even the surrounding overworld. This way, Link will truly become the player in the true meaning of the word, since we will have a true impact on forging our own adventure and our own Hyrule. finally, we have the urban environments. Since with so many races present in Hyrule, we will need several cities, towns and villages to fit them all. The problem with the timeline though is that even here it restricts the extent and even density for specific villages such as Kakariko and towns such as Hyrule Castle Town. This basically means that if Zelda Wii U potentially takes place in the gap between Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess, then the town cannot be larger than the castle town in Twilight Princess. If Zelda Wii U, however, is not bound by the timeline, developers can create the villages, towns and castle town of their dreams and compete with the likes of Oxenford and Novigrad found in The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt.
An evolution of the series is imminent with Zelda U, with faster provinces and a more extensive number of towns, villages, and perhaps even races than in any other previous entry. At the same time, we need to ask ourselves, what are the origins and true essence of series? The answer is as simple as it might seem complicated, namely a fusion of Miyamoto's childhood of exploring the caves in the Kyoto Protectorate and the dream to turn these experiences into a large, boundless open-world game, where gameplay had a priority over storytelling, and if there was any storytelling involved, then it was through the means of non-linear dungeon completion. The original Legend of Zelda gave the player an unmatched level of freedom that has been lacking in the last 29 years. In many ways, you could say that Zelda Wii U is not a remake of the NES classic, but more of a realization of the initial ambition of creating a non-linear adventure game experience within a seamless open world without boundaries, where you forge your own adventures and tackle dungeons and side quests in the order you desire. Zelda Wii U should be the best game it could possibly be, not the best game to fit the conceptions of the timeline, since in the end, it is not the backstory that makes the ultimate Zelda game, but rather the gameplay and creative genius of the developers at Nintendo EAD3.
The series desperately needs to get rid of elements that hold it back, namely the linear story-driven progression and pacing, and with it, the official Zelda timeline. The first one has already been addressed. Now we just have to wait for Nintendo to confirm that Zelda Wii U will indeed be written on empty pages and embody the ideals of a Zelda Reborn. As the series producer stated in 2013, it also allows us a lot of flexibility if you don't define a specific time period or location for the story to take place in.
I'm getting emotional over here. Thank you Andy and Ed for joining me in this Zelda Unknown special, and if you have not already, then check out and subscribe to their channels, M.Productions and Zeltik. And I also want to know your opinion in the comments section about the possibility of Zelda Wii U being a reboot or a rebirth of the series. We're getting close to the end of the first season of Zelda Unknown, but before we turn our attention over to E3, get ready for an epic finale. Hyrule Castle Town and Hyrule Castle are on the menu when I'm next week joined by the one and only HMK for a two-part collaboration, the first part being uploaded on his channel. Until then, this was the Commonwealth Realm,
M.Productions
and Zeltik,
and we will see you girls and guys soon.
Hey guys, this is Zeltik, and it was a true enjoyment to create this collaboration for you. If you want to see more, then please check out these two videos on Kakariko Village and the history of the Zora. And of course, don't forget to subscribe.